Good afternoon, joyful Christian mystic hermit or hermit mystic or whatever. Um, the mystic might go at some point, but I realize we need to have a discussion about what is a mystic and what is not, and kind of demystify it for everybody because I think over the years, and with saints, some of them being mystics, but most of them not, it's gotten sort of built up, hyped up as something special or something. Well, it is different, but it's not that different. I mean, it's like I said, everybody has mystical experiences or can. That's up to God. And having mystical experiences does not define if you're a mystic or not. Um, you do probably have quite a few, but it's not a definite, and it doesn't define. There's other things that define the mystic. And as I said, everybody has a little bit of everything in them. There's a hermit in everyone, there's a mystic in everyone, but that's not the dominant. We need to find out what our predominant, uh, what God wants of us, how He made us. What was the predominant purpose and mission God gave us, and the talents and the gifts and the dispositions, the innate dispositions given us to do that. So I want to finally get to St. Flora. Lovey, I'm doing a video now. Please paw off. We were just out. I just had you outside. Just wait a little bit. Not supper time yet. Just rest. You had a treat. You're all set. I'm talking now, Lovey. Somebody wants attention. He's pushing my body. Saint Flora of Beaulieu, also known as Saint Fleur or Flora of Isindolus. She was a 14th century French nun of the Hospitalier Sisters of St. John of Jerusalem. I think St. John of God, maybe that might be the same person. I read a book about his life, and I've read things about him. He essentially started hospitals. So he was a hospitalier in France. So, but she was known for her mystical. See, they build this up because this is what I think people are fascinated with. Of course, it is different, and they can grab the attention like, oh, wow, isn't that unusual? And the miracle, it's sort of miraculous in a way. Well, it's a reminder of the supernatural that we just most of us don't see every day. Most people out in the workaday world, and even some people, are mystics and like me, and shoved. I thought everybody was like that, had the same experiences that I had, or dreams, or saw through things, or into people, or could tell what was going on, or extrasensory perceptions, etc. So, and I had this great need to be normal. So I shoved it away. I kept shoving it away. Not smart. That wasn't smart. And I didn't realize even what I was shoving away. But I think it's a big reason why God had me get into the Catholic Church, why He worked on me 10 years, and I kept shoving that away out of fear of how my parents would react. Or I needed my parents, I needed their support, their love, their communication, and all of that. So, Lovey, please, no, not now. Just rest. Take a little snooze. Or chew on your bone. Chew on your bone. Get a bone to chew, okay, Lovey? That's a good boy. So, yeah, so that's why, first thing they say, practically, other than her activity running the Hospitalier Sisters of St. John of Jerusalem. She didn't run it, but she helped with it. But they mention, known for her mystical experiences, visions, but also, and dedication to the sick and poor. and she was a nun, a French nun. So, and is considered a Catholic saint. I think I just read of another one, that there was a time period all up until really more later times, later centuries, recent centuries. The people who knew the person would say this is a saint. And then that's how they would be considered after they had died. It had to be after they died. They might say it while they were alive, but it was after they were dead that they declared it. The people did, the ones who knew her. And the priest of the parish, and then a bishop would also, agree, yes, yes. And it was free, it didn't cost a thing. It just was, boom, that was it. People knew. And I liked it that way. And you don't hear of mistakes, really. It was a serious enough matter that there weren't, errors in making people saints. They knew if they were very, very holy or not, or they wanted that person. But unfortunately, see, this is the same thing. To my view, way too much attention placed on the supernatural experiences. Well, so there's so much more. There's so much more than that. And it's great, and it's wonderful to know that we are aware of the supernatural of God. But so, her life and work, Saint Flora of Beaulieu. Birth and calling, she was born around 1300 in Mars, France, Maurs. She grew up in a large family. From an early age, she displayed a strong devotion to God. Pay attention to these cues, these aspects. These have a lot to do with her disposition and the disposition of someone like her. That a strong devotion to God, very strong devotion to God. At around 13, she resisted her parents' attempts to arrange a marriage and instead sought to join the local convent of the Order of St. John of Jerusalem at Beaulieu in the Diocese of Cahors. This is some about, let me make sure I get her monastic life. She joined a convent, was accepted into a convent, the one of St. John of Jerusalem. She dedicated her life to tending to the poor and sick in the attached hospital. The nuns ran a hospital. Her time there was not without hardship. She reportedly faced ridicule and betrayal from some of her fellow sisters and experienced periods of depression. And that's a typical thing. Get a lot of flack, are not understood, have parents that want you to be normal and socialize you and, want you to date, want you to get married or different things, and sicknesses, reaction to the rudeness and the persecution that you're given. Her mysticism and gifts, and also her fellow people. The other sisters were awful to her. Well, they think, envy or resentment. They want, maybe it's built up that people can get envious of the most unnecessary things. So mysticism and gifts. Despite her trials, she was said to have experienced numerous mystical gifts, including visions of Christ, levitation, prophetic knowledge, and the stigmata, experiencing the pain of Christ's wounds. Now, they don't say if it was interior stigmata or exterior. There's the two kinds. But regardless, it says here that she experienced the pain of his wounds. And the stigmata can be the 5 major areas of the stigmata: the shoulder wound, the head, the side, the feet, and the hands. Those are the usual areas of the wounds of Christ, but not all. Some, I've read of some that would just have one wound, like the head or the shoulder or the feet. So there again, these are more temporal, tangible externals of supernatural intervention in the temporal world. So, and in our time, I mean, they really go through that a lot with the church now in our time. They really examine people, and they did with Padre Pio too, even though his superior knew, the brothers who found him after he'd been stricken with the stigmata knew, but somebody got envious and resentful. Somebody in Rome, in the Vatican, not the Pope, but one of the underlings, but higher up, and started an investigation and said it was a fraud. So, and then that caused Padre Pio, he couldn't celebrate Mass. He was on basically house arrest, had to stay in his cell, or they let him go to the library. And he would have to eat alone, and for a couple of years that went on. And then then this man was finally found out. And I don't know if anything happened to him or not, the man who did that to him. But it was horrible, imagine. And Padre Pio did, these mystics, they don't want those things. They want to be left alone. They don't want to be people staring at them or wanting to get to know them because they had some unusual supernatural experience. And it hurt. A lot of that suffering is a big part of a mystic's life. All kinds of suffering. And, one time, well, I'm not talking about Padre Pio. I'll just say this. One time a reporter asked him, well, does it hurt? And he snapped. He had a snap to him. Because, he hurt all the time and he was frustrated and he could see through people so clearly. And it wounded him emotionally just how depraved humanity is. And Catholics, his fellow Catholics, how depraved. And he snapped, he says, well, God didn't give them to me for decoration. Of course they hurt, They're bleeding, he could barely walk. He would have to walk on these holes in his feet that were constantly bleeding. So it was a big hassle and a lot of suffering. So, and the same with her. With her interior or exterior stigmata. And then, word spreads, even though maybe the superior, no one's to know. Word spreads. It didn't with Sister Josepha. They kept that pretty under wraps. And she couldn't speak the language, and she was locked away, basically, in a cell. Not locked, but that was her cell way off in a corner of the convent, and was to stay there and was not to say anything to anyone about any of her mystical experiences, her experiences with Jesus or Mary or Sister Sophie Barat. So Madeline Sophie Barat, I think it is, the foundress who is dead, but would come and visit her and talk with her. And a lot of times they would, just because the person had been so mistreated. They come and give comfort and company. So it can get to be like a vicious cycle in a way. Miracles. One famous miracle of St. Fleur, Flora of France, was occurred when her superiors, suspecting her of giving away convent food to the poor, confronted her. When forced to open her cloak, the provisions inside that she had been sneaking to the poor miraculously turned into beautiful purple flowers. Oh, they're purple red flowers, to be exact. She died in 1347, so just lived to be 47 years old. Her sanctity was recognized by many during her lifetime, and people often sought her prayers and advice. Miracles were reported at her tomb after her death. See, that's like Charlene Richard in Louisiana. There were so many miracles that started happening right after her death, and at her tomb, people would pray, and there would be some incredible miracle occur right there. So, and in her life, she didn't know. She didn't know that her prayers were miraculously all being answered in amazing ways. The last week of her life, she was suffering so, and the priest, this young priest who was the chaplain at the hospital, talked to her about offering her suffering. She knew she was going to die in a week, this little girl, or 2 weeks or something. Yes, it was 2 weeks. And he gave her that opportunity, would you like to offer your sufferings? And she says, well, who can I pray for? So he would every day give her somebody or other or several in the hospital, new patients in the hospital who needed prayer, or even ones that were anti-Catholic, to have a change of heart against the Catholics. And every single person had miraculous something or others. One person just had a spontaneous healing who was dying, some woman. Another woman who was very anti-Catholic had a sudden conversion to Catholicism. Just really, it was one after another. And a nun, the priest confided in the nun, but they told no one else, not her family, not the bishop, not Charlene. They didn't tell the little girl. They just encouraged her, kept giving her more prayers, people to pray for, and situations to pray for. So she never knew. She was an innocent, sweet little saint. God used her. God used her for great things. So, and there's more to that story. I've talked about it in old videos, if you can hunt back a year ago or so. Her feast day, this Flora's feast day, is celebrated on October 5th. She's the patron saint of people who are suicidal, depressed, abandoned, victims of betrayal, single women, single church women, and converts. So she could be my patroness. And for that, it has been known then from these people after they've died that they have a certain proclivity, that the ones that are mentioned here seem to get more help from her, or a special, not more, but special help. Definitely helped. So, people who were suicidal would ask her, Flora, pray for me, please help me. Help me, to keep from wanting to do this to myself. And they would be helped, miraculously helped. Or a depressed person could get through their depressive episodes. Or people who had been abandoned children, abandoned wives, abandoned husbands sometimes. And victims of betrayal, single women of the church who weren't going to marry but weren't in a religious order, and converts, people who became Catholic. So I could ask her for some help, and I'm going to. Why not? I hope when I die, people on earth will ask me for prayers. It won't be, because we can ask anyone. I ask my mom and dad. They're there to help us. They're further along than we are spiritually, especially if they've gotten through their progression and they are in pure love and can be with us right now. They're around us. They know when we're hurting. They want to help us. Ask for the help. And they will help us. And, we'll be the same way. We like to do good for other people now. Think of what it'll be when we have purity of love and we don't have to deal with bodies. We can just, like instantaneously be with someone and know what their needs are and help them in wonderful ways. So that's a lot of what Flora did after she had died. Let's see what else. I found a lot of little odd tidbits of information. She had some difficult experiences with her fellow nuns, and that difficulty was central to her spiritual journey. It helped shape her understanding of faith and forgiveness by transforming her suffering made by these other people. You know how people can be. They can cause other people a lot of suffering. Not physical, it can become physical, but psychological, emotional, mental torment. And a lot of the upset, at least with me, with people, is that I know they could be so much better than to be, poking and jabbing at me. They could be spend their time in such more pure ways than ugliness. I think that's what makes me the most sick, when people get naughty, and in whatever way it is. Like the HOA men who became so obsessed with the fact that I was a woman doing my work, and they were convinced I wasn't really in pain, because I've learned to hide it a lot. I had to. It's not good to have other people just always pitying and, just, it becomes just a big negative reflection. If other people are always so sad about your suffering and feel bad, genuinely they do. But, I didn't want that, because it's not positive, and it didn't do any good. It's better to pass, to not show how much pain, or for them not to know it even. And that was always, oh, how are you? And, they meant it, how are you? And it was just constant. I could never get away from my own pain. So here she was, these people were pestering her. Well, she was different. And they resented it, and some of them envied it. So she had to deal with it and turn it into good. So it transformed her and put her on the path of profound humility, perseverance, persevered in the suffering and the persecution, and it taught her to identify with the persecuted Christ. She thought of Christ in all the ways he was persecuted, even his own family calling him crazy. So she viewed her trials as opportunities to practice the forgiveness and love that Christ exemplified. Just learning about these people helps us, doesn't it? Gives us ideas, or reminds us, or buoys us up on how to be. Because everybody has suffering. The impact of all this on her spiritual journey, she developed a reliance on God. The ridicule and betrayal she faced by these fellow sisters. And think of it, they're nuns. They're supposed to be above that, but we're all human. We are sinners. Did she quit the convent? Oh, no, they don't treat me well. No. She wasn't going to give up her faith and her religion. She didn't quit Catholicism just because. And of all people who should really be elevated, it's Catholics. And I can say that as a convert, at least from Methodism and Lutheranism. What else was I? Presbyterian. Short time Episcopal. Tried everything. I tried many different churches. Trying to find, what clicked, where I was supposed to be, and to try to find like people somebody who knew what was wrong with me and could help me. Once I found out, that I was strange or different in these ways, so spiritually and experientially and stuff, and others of you are too. So the Catholic Church knows about these things. It has a history of this from centuries of, and the Protestants don't. There are some there, but people thought they just assumed I was either New Age or had ESP. They called it ESP. And that's not accurate. Maybe do have some of that, but no, it was deeply spiritual. So it's beyond that. That's why we'll talk about it more. So she really had to, Flora had to turn to God for help and to rely on God, because she had great periods of depression and temptation. She was tempted to leave the convent because it was so isolating to her to be mistreated and singled out and picked on. So that forced her to rely entirely on God for strength and consolation, deepening her personal, secret faithfulness to him. See, that's what God wants, doesn't it? See, and those of you who suffer or whatever in your lives, trials, you think, oh, it never ends, one thing upon another. God is allowing it. He wants reliance on him. He's developing your faith. He's teaching you to be reliant on him. He's teaching you perseverance and strength, and to not be a quitter. It's never a good look. And to understand we're all sinners. And to forgive. See, you learn to forgive. And the more you suffer, the more you'll love. The more you love, the more you'll suffer. And it's beautiful. Wouldn't you rather suffer and be able to suffer and love and forgive others than not? Because we're all going to suffer anyway. So these are some of the things we can learn from Flora and ask her to help us with, too, because she learned it. And the depression, that must have been terrible. I have a sister who has chronic depression. It's awful. She was, I think, sort of born with that disposition. I remember it from my earliest memories of her, just 3 years older. And still, and she has to take all these medications. What a suffering. So, and she relies on God. She became very, very Bible, clings to the Bible, and has become so advanced in her ability to cope and to love and to manage. And she knows the Bible, the living word of Christ. So that's a beautiful thing. She's not Catholic. I think they're more, called Bible fundamentalists, or I don't know what church she goes. I don't think she goes because she's very fearful of getting any kind of infections because she had lymphoma. It's been in remission for several years, but she went through chemo and things. So that she's very fearful of, has anxiety disorder also. So what a trial. But she turned herself to God in a huge way, and her husband too. So great, what could be better? She has a very rich life. My sister does. The one that's next older to 3 years older. So instead of leading an externally recognized life of great deeds, Flora, her sanctity bloomed in silence and hidden endurance. Her trials demonstrated that holiness could be found in patiently bearing daily suffering and performing humble duties with great love, even amidst hostility. You know, I know how Mother Teresa, they canonized her like right away. And they attribute to her what Teresa of Avila said, do great things with love. Or do small things but with great love. Because Mother Teresa said it, and they ascribed it to Mother Teresa, but no, Teresa of Avila said it. But Teresa of Avila was a century and a half after St. Flora. Maybe she got it from St. Flora. We don't know. But I always find that sort of fascinating too. The eagerness with which people want to ascribe some saying or some great thought to someone more recent when it's really an old thought and many, many people had thought of it. And Flora probably got that idea from someone else, some other person that she knew of, or from somebody who had told her about her, or it came to mind and she did it. But so lest we all think, oh wow, I've come up with something new, or they're a saint because look what Mother Teresa said, and they quote that and give it, and she's probably think, no, 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 I knew that was Teresa of Avila's, my patron namesake. I knew that was her saying. But we want to so badly to put people on pedestals once they're canonized, or as they're being canonized, when they don't want it. Even in heaven, I don't think they want it. But so it really, I don't know. I think enjoy. I like especially the hidden ones, the ones we don't know much about, and quietly just went their way in their lifetime too, and after their death. So that's what her life developed as, this total reliance on God, and in being sanctified silently and in hidden ways, and enduring her trials quietly, not complaining, or patiently. I don't know. It didn't say she didn't complain. She might have. Not who wouldn't? And bearing daily her suffering, performing humble duties with great love, even amidst hostility. The little flower, Therese of Lisieux, also, that was her thing. And, so they canonized her basically for, being like that. What somebody would flip water on her when she was, or something. I forget what that was, but somebody really was nasty to her. Another sister resented her. And Therese took it, bore it quietly, and just prayed for her, prayed for the other person. But reacted, didn't like it inside, but kept quiet. And but I think the little flower was known, do little acts with great love, the same theme. But they made that a big, huge thing. Her little book of love, her little way of love. I think they just, they want more saints. I think people just like to have saints. They like to put people on pedestals, and they especially love it if there's miracles. And I'm sure we could go to the graveyard and stand by someone's grave and ask for help, and there could be a miracle. Someone, a family member or something, because they are on the other side, purified, most of them after so long of a time, and want to help. So I don't want to just upset anyone. I just like reality and truth. Be realistic, and I don't need the hype. I don't need the hype to respect and to appreciate, or to ask someone who's died to help me. And I got help from Dean Wakefield for my son when a car wouldn't start. He'd been a neighbor man, and he was a great mechanic. And my son, I said, I'm going to ask. My son had called, oh, help, what can I do? And I said, I'm going to ask Dean. Oh, who's Dean Wakefield? I told him, this neighbor man. Well, how do you know he's in heaven, or how do you know he's in purgatory? I said, well, I don't know. I'll just ask wherever he is to help you. Because he had rented one of these cars that you pay money and get the key, and I forget what they were called. I don't think they have it anymore. He was in Washington, D.C. at the time, working, first job out of college, and the car wouldn't start, the one that he had rented for the hour. And as soon as I asked Dean, he says, oh, Mom, you're not going to believe it. You're not going to believe it. I said, Dean helped get it started, didn't he? Well, whatever, but it started. He says, I can't believe it. And I said, well, thank Dean. And he said, thanks, Dean. And I did too, because I knew Dean Wakefield helped. Well, he's not a saint. He wasn't canonized or anything. He wasn't even Catholic. But I knew he would help. He was a very kind human being on earth. And he knew God. And he knows God now. That's the main thing. So go for it. Source of mystical gifts with Flora, St. Flora. Her perseverance in the face of adversity and her continued effort to love God made her dearer and dearer to God, leading to her receiving extraordinary mystical gifts such as visions, levitation, and the stigmata. These divine favors served as a counterpart to her earthly hardships. St. Flora's life serves as a model of forgiveness and fortitude in the face of persecution. We've been over that before, but here's more information on that. Forgiveness as fortitude. Her story is presented as a testament to the importance of forgiving our persecutors. She did not let the mistreatment define her relationships or turn her from her vows, but instead endured it with fortitude. Fortitude is one of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. Fortitude, courage, strength. Patronage. We already mentioned that. Her experiences with abandonment and betrayal. Her own abandonment and being betrayed by her fellow religious sisters are why she is invoked as the patron saint of victims of betrayal, the abandoned, and the depressed. We've already said that. This is different things I found, and they're repeating a lot of it. See if there's something different in this. Again, her legacy is someone who endured immense emotional pain while remaining steadfast in her faith and commitment to her calling. Her vocation as a religious sister for the Hospitalier Sisters of John of Jerusalem. I think also aka John of God. So she remained faithful to serving the poor and the sick, even though she was sick at heart, depressed, sad, feeling pushed around. Empathy for others is another aspect for St. Flora. Her ability to overcome her own suffering with grace allowed her to develop spiritual wisdom and offer wise counsel to all who flocked to her. Her profound understanding of suffering and forgiveness likely made her an empathetic advisor to those facing their own trials. That's why, this pray, love, forgive. There is no love without forgiveness. Did I say that right? There is no forgiveness without love. Either way it works, doesn't it? So, the importance of understanding suffering and forgiveness. Love and suffering and forgiveness is key. Forgiveness is key to love and suffering. So, how did her visions in the stigmata relate to her suffering at the hands of nuns? St. Flora's visions in her stigmata were understood as divine compensations and affirmations of her hidden suffering. In other words, God really gave her divine compensations because of how she handled her suffering. That God's gifts to her helped her, provided her with the strength to persevere through the ridicule and betrayal she experienced from her fellow nuns. So here's a little more detail. Divine consolation and strength, the visions of Christ and the visions of the Virgin Mary served as a direct source of consolation and encouragement, particularly during her periods of depression and temptation to leave the convent. When isolated by her community, these mystical experiences affirmed her choice to stay and caused her to dedicate her life to God. Union with Christ's passion, the stigmata, the experiencing of suffering, the pain of Christ's wounds in her hands, feet, and side. So that's how we know where they are now. Her wounds were in Christ's wounds. She shared Christ's wounds in her hands, her feet, and her side. That suffering allowed her to unite her personal emotional suffering from the nuns with the physical and spiritual suffering of Jesus on the cross. She joyfully accepted this suffering out of her great love for Jesus, transforming her earthly pain into a meaningful spiritual offering for the salvation of souls and the conversion of sinners. This is good to remember. Don't get sidetracked by people who bully or who taunt or ridicule or lie or betray or abandon you. I had thought of the ex-husband today, and I had to shoo it away. I had to do the pray, love, forgive, and I'd even had a thought come, and I had to clear that away and let the person go in my mind. Forgive the person and love the person and move on from it. Validation of Flora's piety. While the sisters often made fun of her, these divine favors from God, including the stigmata and prophetic knowledge, confirmed her profound holiness to others. Well, see, that could make them very envious, couldn't it? The same very ones that were making fun of her would see or notice her holiness, and it bothered them, but she had learned to not pay attention, but other than to pray for them, love them, and forgive them, and then keep on helping the sick and the poor herself. So soon people outside the convent recognized her sanctity and came to her for prayers and advice, bypassing the very nuns who had ridiculed her. God has his ways, doesn't he? I mentioned, and for all of us, you don't have to be a mystic for God to do these, help you, and also remind you that he's there. As I told you about my sisters, and God bless them, they didn't understand. I had tried to explain in the past about spiritual directors, and my mother also was convinced I was manipulated and controlled by this old priest. I was brainwashed by him, and they also had this odd idea that if he told me to look cross-eyed, I would have to look any little thing that he said I would have to do. And if I didn't do, I would be guilted or in trouble. They had this very strange, incorrect idea about spiritual directors, They're not there for their own sakes. They're giving their time and their knowledge and their lifelong experience for free. That's why it gripes me when these hermits who have no counseling or experience or training or coursework or licenses are charging people. And like a week after they become hermits, one guy I know, fireman one week and counseling people for pay the next. It just, ooh. But see, these priests, my spiritual father, with his spiritual guidance and teaching me how to discern the devil and different things, is invaluable. And talk over anything going on in my spiritual life or my temporal life, guiding me so wisely through a lot of torment from fellow Catholics, and helping me stay strong and recognize that we're all sinners, including myself. He'd hear my confessions, he knew my sins, but he didn't dwell on them. And he would say, don't ever think of it again, and don't ever speak of it again. You've been forgiven. And even if it was horrible or whatever, So, but and you have no friends. My sisters were giving me that lecture out of great concern for me. So concerned for me, for their poor sister who had no friends and was, in this strange thing, thinking she was a hermit. Or, of course, they thought of that as a recluse, and no contact with anyone ever. And somehow there I was with them, but we had just buried our mother, so of course they came, and I drove them around and things. But we had to stop someplace after they went on about how I had no friends and I need friends, and I had too much personality just to be like this and to not to be able to talk to anyone. And I tried, but they just couldn't break through. They had this so stuck in their minds. So then this lady runs, oh, it's so good to see you, oh, my dear friend. And she turned, oh, I just love your sister. She's just so wonderful. We've been friends so long. And it was like I knew God had arranged that. I hadn't seen that woman. What were the odds? I didn't even live in my hometown anymore. That she would just be there, like within minutes after this talk. So see, God helps us out. He does, and with humor. It was, I think it was funny. I didn't laugh or anything. I didn't say a word to my sisters about, oh, well, so you think, nothing at all. They had seen it, and they were silent. They didn't say a peep either. But God put them at ease. I'm thinking he did by that. The eldest one definitely hasn't ever been concerned again, or or hasn't mentioned it anyway. So God does these wonderful things for us, and God did for Flora. And so see, and that, imagine that these people would go to Flora for her advice and go bypass these sisters who had been putting her down and putting her down. And of course, Flora wouldn't have said a word about it either. She would have handled it very humbly, very discreetly. You don't want to rub it in to anyone who's been detracting you or harming. You don't want to, take the gifts that God gives us and be grateful, and don't boast about it. Or I guess maybe sharing it with you, maybe that seemed boasting. It was an example to you, and it was the timing and everything. It was like a comedy, like some kind of a sitcom, where how they'd have the timing just right, and something would turn out that the solution would be right there. So I knew God was in the moment. I knew he was. I did feel bad. I didn't want my sisters thinking so horribly about my vocation, or about the Catholic Church. It's not what people think. Yes, there are sinners in it, but the priests aren't just, and they're not all out, raping little boys, So I've heard that, and it's just how horrible. My spiritual father, after that, had been a priest all those years, and he said he was ashamed to go out in public after what those priests had done. He was it really affected the many, many holy priests very deeply and sorrowfully that these other priests were doing that. So, but God handles it. And people who can pray, love, and forgive, and have an ounce of common sense know that it's not every single one. Even the percentage is actually quite low. But, no percent is too high. No one infringement or horrible abuse is too much. And that goes for any of us. Any sin is too much for us. But yet we do. I do. And Flora did. But the thing is with these saints is that they overcame themselves. They chose God. They turned to God always, rather than letting the depression get them or take them down. Or I've just got puppies who keep wanting their little paws rubbed and their ears rubbed. And so a victim soul, her trials in the convent, coupled with the physical suffering of the stigmata, positioned her as a victim soul in the Catholic tradition, one who embraces suffering for the benefit of others and for God's glory. So she offered her sufferings for others. This perspective provided, gotta get this a little bigger so I can read it better. My glasses. Provided a spiritual framework for enduring her daily hardships within her community. So, all these things that she did, that she endured, and also how she responded, all of them, plus God reaching in. Her life went on. She didn't crumble. He gave her strength. Her faith increased. It wasn't pleasant, but she focused on helping others, the sick and the suffering and the dying in the hospital, and those who came for her guidance and her advice, her friendship. She met their needs. And she didn't attack the sisters. She didn't try to do anything back to them. She didn't rub the good that she got into their faces. She didn't go around, well, God's given me this, so there, look at you. Or no, she was very meek and humble of heart and remained that way. And that's from God's grace. It's because she turned to God always. As it also said, mercy, that's enough, that's enough. No barking at people outside. Mercy, that's enough. Maybe if I turn the light on, that will calm them a little bit, reassure them. So, yeah, she united herself with Jesus on the cross, and she thought through, well, Jesus had this experience too. People didn't like him. They thought he was different. They, on and on. Anything of our trials, any of them, we can put them up against Jesus's and see that he had them and had it worse because he was pure and he was God. And yet they even treated God that way. So, and Jesus forgave them. God forgave them. So he prayed for them on the cross. He loved them and he forgave them. So suffering and love are intertwined. These are some of the issues that Flora had. She sometimes felt that she was leading too comfortable a life. And at other times, then it got very severe. let's see if there's anything else in here that was a little bit different. That is, a lot of these things are the, no, that's the same. She did have blood flowing from her side. And even that, see, that's, here's one. On at least one occasion, while in deep meditation on the Holy Spirit, she meditated on the Holy Spirit. Witness reported seeing her levitate about 4 feet off the ground. And how anyone knew that she was meditating on the Holy Spirit, she probably had to report to her superior. You know, the superior probably wanted to know, about it, what was going on. Witnesses probably told the superior. She also had blood flowing from her mouth, too, during her stigmata, her times of blood flowing from her side or mouth. And that's something we don't think about. Jesus probably had blood flow from his mouth. Her prophecy and infused knowledge. She had knowledge of hidden matters that she could not have known naturally. And that's the gift that she used to provide counsel for those who sought her out. During one particular she had ecstasies. One profound ecstatic state, which occurred between the Feast of All Saints and the Feast of St. Cecilia, a period of about 3 weeks, she reportedly took no nourishment. Visions. She was frequently consoled by visions of Christ, the Virgin Mary, and other saints. Temptation by the devil, of course, that's a big part of all of this. She was and our spiritual growth too. The more you spiritually grow, the more the devil will enter in, and in different phases. We went over that in some. I had little books that I went by about a year ago, or last fall or last winter, on evil and how the devil will tempt in the different levels of temptations. So she was reportedly beset by a demon on at least one occasion. Now, this says here it's considered a sign of high state of holiness in Christian mysticism. I disagree with that. And I think, Bernard McGinn, I don't know, but it's for anybody will have that. Well, if that's a high state of holiness, why am I such a sinner? I can ask that. No, I've been through different levels of demonic attacks, and now the devil attacks me more subtly with concerns or not, a sense of, like when I was ill and I thought that, it was all God leading me, but afterwards I could tell the devil was trying to mess with me also with some of my reminiscing or thinking that I would never be able to get energy again and things like that, tempting me to despair. God doesn't do that. But so it's more subtle, it's more psychological warfare the devil uses with me. But before, you appear in dreams. I'd wake up and I would be paralyzed, couldn't move. He'd be, sitting on me, a force, a pressure, sitting right on me. I couldn't move, couldn't lift up. And, I couldn't even reach for a rosary, which I always keep in bed for such things too, but also just closeness, a signal closeness, a kinesthetic tactile closeness to Mary through the rosary prayer, but by having the rosary with me. But I mentally, just with my imagination, my image, had my arm hold that rosary out, right out in front of me, just using my mind to image that, and the devil left. Well, I couldn't see a form. It was a force that totally left. I knew it was the devil, though. The devil will flee with the rosary. The devil hates the Virgin Mary. And that's scriptural, too, from Revelation, how the woman will crush the snake, the serpent, with her heel. So, but whether it's a high state of holiness, no, no, I don't think, uh, that's not our concern. And it says here, uh, whoever considers that, uh, forget about it. None of that matters. Uh, it's not what level we're at. Uh, that's just the temptation by the devil, as far as I'm concerned, to get you thinking about yourself. Oh, what level am I in? Oh, am I a mystic or not? Because it's been so overblown. The mystic thing is overblown, I think, because they associate it with saints, and they've elevated saints so much. There's such an emphasis. Just be the very best Christian you can be. Love God the best you can. Follow God. Live the gospel rule of life. Try to live the gospel day in and night out. And experiences will come and go. They're passing. So, but they help form us. See, that's what I think is the point of this, is that how she lived and how she turned her life, what she chose, how she handled the issues. So there was more. She had some miracles post-mortem, which a lot of saints have, and other people have. My mom and dad have come and helped me. That's a miracle. See, so Dean Wakefield helped my son get that car started. Boom, just like that. So a miracle. Think about, you have miracles around you all the time, in your homes, at work. Just start watching for them. The everyday miracles. So it's a miracle that I have more energy today. And it's a miracle that I realized the Holy Spirit told me, or some saint maybe my dad, said, if you get your overalls on, you'll be in better mode to get to work. Again, do my manual labor. So tomorrow I'm going to put overalls on. And my get my work socks, my work shoes, and my overalls, and I'll be more in the mindset to work. I consider that a miracle, how that came to me. Dress for success, no matter what it is we're doing. Succeed. Dress so that you'll succeed, and have the mindset and the comfort, or the mental mind-body association. Work clothes. Oh, I better do some work, because you get out of I was getting too deep into, I just wanted to be with God so much, and just to be consumed by God, subsumed into God. I needed such an infilling from God of the spiritual, because I was so drained and stripped, because I overdid it out trying to help or do different things. And I realized, but you have to have balance, spiritual balance. Now, Flora had that. She helped people with spiritual direction. She helped the poor and the sick and the dying, and the poor. She's so human. She was trying to sneak food out of the monastery that they needed. Well, I don't blame the Mother Superior. They had to have food to eat. They weren't independently wealthy. They depended on other people to bring them food. So, because they were helping in this hospital with the sick and the dying, but they weren't being paid for it. So, yes, she had to be concerned about, well, why is all our food leaving? And it was very sweet of Flora to want to feed the poor. But the sisters doing their work needed food too. But God protected her from getting all the provisions. He turned it into a miracle with the purple red flowers coming out rather than when she opened her cloak that had all this food stuffed under it. She was getting ready to leave with it, and the Mother Superior stopped her. Wondered, open your cloak. What's in there? Suspected her. So, and I'm sure the miracle then, so took the Mother Superior that, and Flora probably realized, I need to cool it, and pray, ask God, bring us more food so we can help the poor then, or some way get away. So I just think it's so good to understand these people. And here she was in 13th or 15th century. And so Flora, Fleur, Flower, Flora of Beaulieu. God bless you all.